What happened on January 15th, 1947 in Los Angeles shocked the nation and created one of America's most enduring mysteries. Today, we're examining the Black Dahlia case with new perspective and recently emerged evidence. Before we begin, if you appreciate detailed historical investigations, I invite you to subscribe and join our community. At the end, I'd value your analysis in the comments. This is a story about justice, investigation, and an unsolved mystery that continues to this day. January 15th, 1947. 10 a.m. A mother pushes a stroller down Norton Avenue in Los Angeles and sees what she thinks is a broken department store mannequin lying in the grass. But as she gets closer, something feels wrong, terribly wrong. This wasn't a mannequin. It was a young woman named Elizabeth Short. The discovery shocked the nation, and the world would forever remember her as the Black Dahlia. What happened to her was so calculated, so methodical, that even hardened LAPD detectives who had seen everything were deeply affected by the scene. Her killer was never caught. But after 78 years, new evidence has emerged. In the next 15 minutes, you're going to see the crime scene detail so disturbing that police hid it from the public for decades. 3 suspects, each more compelling than the last, and the one question only the real killer could answer. One suspect was allegedly recorded on wiretap, making suspicious statements. Another had mortuary training and inside knowledge. And the third may have been connected to similar cases across multiple states. Stay until the end, because what we uncover might finally explain why this case was designed to be unforgettable. It's 1947. World War II has just ended. Soldiers are flooding back home looking for work and purpose. Los Angeles is booming, a city of broken dreams and overnight fortunes. The population is exploding, and Hollywood is calling to dreamers from every corner of America. Hollywood is the factory of fantasy, but behind the studio lots, there's a darker reality. Organized crime influences the nightclubs. Some officials turn a blind eye, and young women are vanishing without a trace, their disappearances barely making the newspapers. Elizabeth Short was one of thousands of young women trying to make it in Tinseltown. She had no money, no permanent address, no family nearby to protect her. She was vulnerable, moving from friend to friend, couch to couch, surviving however she could. And someone was watching. Someone knew exactly how vulnerable she was. On the morning of January 15th, 1947, Betty Bersinger was taking her 3-year-old daughter for a walk in the Lamert Park neighborhood. She spotted something pale lying in a vacant lot about 20 feet from the sidewalk. At first, she genuinely thought it was a discarded department store mannequin that someone had dumped illegally. But she got closer, and the horrifying reality became clear. This was a crime scene. The nature of what had been done was deeply disturbing. Investigators immediately knew this was unlike anything they had encountered before. This was no crime of passion. This was calculated. Let me walk you through exactly what police found, because every single detail matters in understanding this case. The evidence showed extreme precision and planning. Everything had been meticulously cleaned, not a trace of evidence left behind. The killer had spent considerable time preparing. The scene was staged deliberately, positioned exactly 15 inches from the sidewalk, as if the perpetrator wanted it to be found quickly. Investigators immediately knew the victim had been killed elsewhere. This vacant lot was simply a stage, a place to display what had been done. But where was the actual crime scene? That location has never been found. The forensic evidence suggested the victim had suffered over multiple days. Physical evidence indicated restraint. And here's the detail that made even veteran homicide detectives struggle with the case. Several of them had to step aside. Some requested reassignment. The psychological toll was immense. The injuries showed a level of control and precision that was chilling. This wasn't done in rage or panic. This was done methodically, with time and planning. This was ritualistic. This was a signature. The perpetrator wanted recognition for what they had done. They wanted people to know this wasn't random. This was intentional. Within hours of the discovery, the press descended like vultures. They nicknamed her the Black Dahlia, inspired by the popular film noir, The Blue Dahlia, that was in theaters at the time. And because she was known to wear black clothing and had striking raven dark hair. The name stuck. The myth was born. Elizabeth Short became a symbol rather than a person. But who was Elizabeth Short before the world turned her into a symbol, a cautionary tale, a ghost story? She was born in 1924 in Hyde Park, Massachusetts. When she was just 6 years old, her father abandoned the family during the Great Depression. He left them with nothing. She grew up poor, struggling with asthma, but always dreaming of Hollywood. At 19 years old, Elizabeth moved to California chasing those dreams. She worked odd jobs, whatever she could find. She lived with friends, sometimes acquaintances, sometimes complete strangers who took pity on her. During the war, she dated soldiers, many of whom never came home from the Pacific. She kept their photographs. She mourned them. She was looking for stability, for family, for someone to see her. People who knew her described her as friendly but deeply secretive. She told different stories to different people about her background, her family, her ambitions. Some researchers believe she invented personas to survive, becoming whoever she needed to be to get by. Her last confirmed sighting was January 9th, 1947, 6 full days before her body was discovered. She was seen at the Biltmore Hotel downtown. She was making a phone call in the lobby, witnesses reported. She seemed agitated, nervous. And then she walked out of the hotel and disappeared into the Los Angeles night. 6 days later, her body would be found in that vacant lot. What happened during those 6 missing days? Where did she go? Who was she with? These questions have haunted investigators for nearly 8 decades. The LAPD launched the biggest manhunt in Los Angeles history. Over 750 investigators were assigned to the case at various points. They conducted thousands of interviews. They followed hundreds of leads. But here's where the investigation took a very strange turn that ultimately may have allowed the real perpetrator to slip through their fingers forever. Within just days of the incident, the Los Angeles Examiner newspaper received a package. It was addressed directly to them in cut-out letters, like a ransom note. Inside the package, Elizabeth Short's birth certificate, her social security card, photographs of her, and her personal address book. But when detectives examined the address book, they noticed something crucial. Several pages had been torn out. The note inside, made from letters cut from newspapers, read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." The promised letter never came. But here's what made investigators' blood run cold. The pages torn from the address book were specifically from the section marked with the letter D. Was the perpetrator's name in that book? Had they removed their own entry to protect themselves? And then the false confessions started pouring in like a flood. Over 500 people eventually claimed to be the Black Dahlia killer. One man walked into a police station with theatrical dramatics. It turned out to be completely false. Another person mailed unusual items. None were connected to the actual case. The investigation became overwhelmed with distractions. The case became an absolute media circus. Every attention seeker, every person seeking their 15 minutes of fame, flooded the investigation with noise. And somewhere in all that chaos, all that confusion, all that media frenzy and public hysteria, the real perpetrator slipped away unnoticed. They were right there in plain sight, and nobody saw them because everyone was looking in the wrong direction. But here's something most people don't know about this investigation. LAPD detectives kept one specific detail about the crime scene completely secret from the public. A detail that only the actual perpetrator would know. They called it the key question. And they used this secret detail to filter out every single false confession that came through their doors. If someone couldn't answer the key question correctly, they weren't the perpetrator. Period. To this day, 78 years later, the key question has never been publicly revealed. Researchers have speculated, journalists have investigated, but the LAPD has kept this detail locked away. Investigators used it methodically to eliminate suspects. If someone couldn't answer the key question with specific, verifiable details, they were immediately ruled out. It was the ultimate filter, the one thing that separated attention seekers from a genuine person of interest. Some researchers believe the key question relates to specific evidence details, something so particular that revealing it would forever compromise the investigation's integrity. Others think it involves scene positioning, that only someone who was actually present would know. But no one, in 78 years of investigation, has ever answered it correctly. Which means one of two things. The perpetrator either died without confessing, or the secret went to the grave with them. Now, let's talk about the suspects. And we'll start with the most famous and most controversial one. Meet Dr. George Hill Hodel, wealthy beyond measure, brilliant, with a genius-level IQ, socially untouchable in 1940s Los Angeles high society. And most importantly for our investigation, he had a medical degree from one of the country's finest institutions, which gave him surgical knowledge that some believe is relevant to this case. George Hodel wasn't just wealthy, he was a Hollywood insider with connections throughout the city. He attended parties with movie stars and power brokers. In 1949, just 2 years after Elizabeth Short's death, Hodel was accused of serious crimes against his own teenage daughter. The case went to trial, there was testimony, there was evidence, and then suddenly, mysteriously, the case was dismissed. Charges dropped. Many believe his wealth and connections influenced the outcome. The story could have ended there, with George Hodel living out his life untouched by justice. But then, in 2003, something extraordinary happened. Hodel's own son, Steve Hodel, who had become a decorated LAPD homicide detective, retired from the force and started investigating his own father. Imagine that moment. Imagine looking at your own father and wondering if he could be connected to one of history's most infamous cases. Steve Hodel opened his father's past, and what he found deeply troubled him. Steve Hodel discovered photographs in his father's collection of women who bore striking resemblances to Elizabeth Short. He found handwriting samples that appeared similar to the anonymous letters sent to police. He discovered that his father's home, the Soden house in Los Feliz, was located just minutes from the vacant lot where Elizabeth's body was found. Every piece he uncovered made the connection seem stronger. The evidence was circumstantial, yes, but it kept accumulating. But the most compelling evidence Steve Hodel found wasn't something his father left behind. It was something the LAPD had buried for decades. In 1950, just 3 years after the crime, the LAPD planted surveillance devices throughout the Hodel mansion. They recorded conversations for weeks, and on those tapes, buried in police archives for over 50 years, George Hodel can allegedly be heard making disturbing statements, including, "Supposin' I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." Steve Hodel published his findings in a book that became a bestseller. He believes with absolute certainty that his father was the Black Dahlia killer, and that George Hodel's wealth, his medical connections, and most devastatingly, police corruption at the highest levels protected him from prosecution. But despite the wiretap recording, despite all the circumstantial evidence, no charges were ever filed. George Hodel died in 1999 in San Francisco, a free man. The case officially remains unsolved. But there's a second major theory that suggests this wasn't the work of one person, but a conspiracy involving at least two individuals working together. Enter Leslie Dillon, a bellhop and mortuary assistant who had detailed knowledge of how to handle deceased bodies. In late 1948, Dillon sent unsolicited letters to a psychiatrist discussing the Black Dahlia case in disturbingly specific detail. Details that hadn't been made public. The psychiatrist immediately contacted the LAPD. When police questioned Dillon, he claimed that his friend, a man named Jeff Connors, had actually committed the crime, and that Dillon had merely helped afterward. Police launched a massive search for this Jeff Connors. They interviewed hundreds of people. They checked every record. But Jeff Connors didn't exist. No birth certificate, no employment records, no witnesses who had ever seen him. Many investigators believe Dillon invented Connors as a way to confess while maintaining plausible deniability. The theory expands to include Mark Hansen, a wealthy nightclub owner who ran several clubs in Los Angeles. Elizabeth Short had stayed at Hansen's home in the weeks before her death. Some researchers believe Hansen discovered Elizabeth knew too much about his illegal business operations, perhaps related to gambling or other activities, and may have wanted her silenced permanently. It would explain Dillon's detailed knowledge and the professional nature of what occurred. But like everything in this case, there's a problem with this theory too. Leslie Dillon had an alibi. He was documented as being in San Francisco at the time of the incident. Hotel records, witnesses, employment records all placed him hundreds of miles away. And Mark Hansen, despite being interviewed extensively, despite clear connections to the victim, he was never charged with anything. The theory remains just that, a theory. But in 2025, a new book has emerged with a completely different suspect, taking the investigation in yet another direction. The new book names Carl Balsiger, a World War II veteran and professional butcher, as a person of interest. Balsiger knew Elizabeth Short personally. They had been acquainted in the months before her death. More importantly, his training as a butcher gave him very specific skills. And here's the key detail. Immediately after Elizabeth Short's death, Carl Balsiger suddenly left Los Angeles. He moved out of state without explanation, abandoning his life and job. Researchers investigating Balsiger have uncovered something even more disturbing. They've potentially linked him to several other unsolved cases of young women in different states during the late 1940s and early 1950s. Each case showed similar patterns, similar methodology, similar staging. If true, this would mean the Black Dahlia wasn't an isolated incident, but possibly the work of someone who operated across state lines. But once again, there's no definitive proof, no confession, no conviction. So we're left with 3 compelling suspects and 0 convictions. Why? After 78 years and thousands of hours of investigation, why does this case remain unsolved? The answer lies in the perfect storm of circumstances that conspired to let someone escape justice. First, forensic science in 1947 was primitive. There was no DNA analysis, no databases, no sophisticated crime scene processing. Detectives had magnifying glasses and fingerprint powder. That was it. Second, the media circus destroyed legitimate leads. Every newspaper wanted the exclusive story. Reporters paid witnesses for interviews, contaminating testimony. False confessions overwhelmed real evidence. And third, there's strong evidence suggesting corruption. Officers with connections to wealthy suspects may have deliberately sabotaged the investigation. Evidence disappeared. Files went missing. Key witnesses were never properly interviewed. The system designed to catch perpetrators may have protected this one instead. And finally, the perpetrator themselves never made a mistake. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no evidence trail. They washed everything completely clean. They chose a disposal site with no surveillance. They communicated through untraceable methods. This wasn't done in passion or rage. This was planned, controlled, calculated, and executed with chilling perfection. The Black Dahlia case isn't just an unsolved crime. It's a mirror reflecting the darkness that lurked beneath the Hollywood dream in post-war America. Elizabeth Short was just 22 years old. She wanted what so many wanted then and want now: to be seen, to matter, to make her mark on the world. She dreamed of Hollywood stardom, and in the cruelest, most tragic twist of fate, she got her wish. She became famous. She became immortal, but not in the way she dreamed. She became a symbol, a cautionary tale, a ghost story. The world knows her name, but few remember the person she actually was. So now I'll leave you with the question that has haunted investigators, journalists, and true crime enthusiasts for nearly 8 decades. Who do you think is the most likely suspect? Was it Dr. George Hodel, the wealthy surgeon who allegedly made incriminating statements on tape, but was protected by wealth and influence? Was it Leslie Dillon, the mortuary assistant with insider knowledge who may have worked with accomplices? Or was it Carl Balsiger, the butcher who fled Los Angeles and may have been connected to similar cases? Or was it someone we've never even heard of, someone whose name has never appeared in any investigation, someone who committed the perfect crime and took the secret to their grave? Comment below with your theory. And if you want part 2, where we'll explore the key question in more detail and examine the brand new 2025 evidence that's emerged, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story isn't over. The truth is still out there, waiting to be uncovered.